climate change, indeed biodiversity loss, are the biggest challenges that are facing humanity right now. And the reality is the warning lights are flashing bright red.
Our government is very clear in its mind about our obligation to the coming generations, about our need to leave behind a greener planet for our great-grandchildren. That's what this revolution is about.
Today, the green energy revolution we've all been waiting for is well underway. Clean energy from sun and wind, which of course don't cause climate change, have become decisively cheaper than dirty fossil fuels. And they're available in abundance. In fact, the sun offers us more energy in an hour than we use in an entire year. And there's enough wind to power the globe 10 times over.
That has now brought us to this energy transition and the green energy revolution. What is it promising us? It's promising us reliable, low-cost energy in abundance, both distributed and central generated, which allows us to transform economies, and ultimately it is also allowing us to save lives because of the climate change, which will have an unimaginable impact.
So renewable energy seems unarguably the way forward. But some people still see a problem. The sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. So is this intermittency its fatal flaw?
The problem is that most people are thinking too small scale. Most people are thinking about renewables just within their nation state. We have to think in continental terms. We have to plug everybody into the solar power and often good wind power that you find in deserts. Just imagine that you drew a box in the desert 150 kilometers by 150 kilometers and fill that box with solar power stations. You could produce all the electricity that Europe produces today from all its sources, from all its power stations. From a technical point of view, it's perfectly easy to power the world from renewable energy. What you do is you build long-distance transmission lines using high-voltage direct current lines that can transmit power over thousands of kilometers with very little loss to link us all to the areas where renewable energy is most abundant.
So intermittency wouldn't be a problem if we could get our energy from wherever the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, places far away. But just how far away?
We're talking about up to 6,000 kilometers.
So that's like from the middle of the Sahara to London or Berlin.
Yeah, 6,000 kilometers. So in terms of technology development and practice, actually the global energy interconnection is feasible.
It is feasible now.
It is feasible now.
But the electricity flow needs to be controlled precisely. How can we switch it from wherever it's most abundant and therefore cheapest to wherever it's most needed with split-second precision and at any given moment of the day or night? The answer is smart grids. And in Professor Zhang's lab, they're developing smart grids that can control these energy flows very precisely. So if you combine long-distance power lines with smart grids and clean energy, you get the global energy interconnection. And if this vision is realized, it'll be able to supply electricity day or night across Asia and Africa and the Middle East, all the way into Europe, the Americas, and the Antipodes.
For a flexible, secure energy future, which I see as the cost-effective one and as the sustainable one, then interconnection is just an absolutely central part of that. And it is clear already that the technology and the cost of that interconnection is there, and we should be able to move over to a decarbonised energy system.
And the electricity grid needs to become a little bit more like another grid that we have all got used to using and all take for granted now, and that's the information internet. In the information internet, Anybody, from the largest provider of information, Google or Amazon, to the smallest individual blogger, can feed in information into the global network. Anybody can draw information out of the global network wherever they are. And it needs to be the same with energy, that anybody can feed in from their rooftop solar panels or from a giant desert solar power station, and anybody can access the renewable energy that's being fed in the same way. And the information internet crosses borders. It's a global creation that we now all use, and it needs to be the same with energy. We have to think beyond the nation state, share our clean energy resources in order for everyone to have a reliable supply of unlimited, cheap, clean energy. Governments could make this transition without annoying their voters. Most voters would be perfectly happy if the power that comes out of their plug comes from renewable energy rather than fossil fuels. The voters aren't the problem. The problem is lack of leadership.
So Nick Dunlop came up with a striking solution: to create a forum where political leaders from around the world could build momentum together for this clean energy transition. And he called it the Climate Parliament.
Climate Parliament is a network of politicians, of members of parliament, legislators around the world. In each parliament where we are active, we bring together legislators, and they come from all political parties. This isn't a party political issue. Members of parliament generally are not specialists, they're generalists because they have to deal with all kinds of issues. But what they are specialists at is getting governments to do things. That's what they're the experts at, and that's what we need to do. We don't have a problem with technology. We have all the technologies we need to solve the climate problem tomorrow. The world is full of engineers, brilliant engineers who know how to build this stuff. We don't have a shortage of engineers. What we have a shortage of is political leadership. She's okay with that? Yes, he's okay.
It's summer 2015, and the Climate Parliament is meeting in the run-up to the Paris COP. They're focusing on designing the proposal they're taking to the world leaders in Paris, which includes both large-scale continental grids and micro-scale grids for villages in the global south, drawing on local clean energy resources. And they're calling it the Green Grids Initiative. The Paris Summit, COP21. It's the 21st time world leaders have met in response to the climate catastrophe. Will they move decisively towards renewables this time, away from the old familiar lure of fossil fuels? What would it take to make this change?
There are always three elements. I mean, the first is you need leadership. The second is you need civil society support, and you need people mobilized to deliver these things.
Surrounding the COP, thousands of civil society protesters are demanding clean energy to reduce carbon emissions and to bring about energy justice.
And you need the power of a good idea. And the kind of work that Nick is doing is putting into the furnace of change the kinds of good ideas that will enable civil society to mobilize and that will enable us to support leaders. Leaders can become very isolated. Leaders need to be supported. They need to have the people on their side.
For the Climate Parliament, Paris is an opportunity to recruit support for the initiative from key leaders like the Energy Minister of Costa Rica.
This is one of the slides used for a global energy internet. Each region links up into a regional grid to trade renewable energy across borders. And for Costa Rica, this works on two levels. One is that Costa Rica, as a major renewable energy leader, can benefit from the interconnections and can often be an exporter, but also can have more energy security because when it's cloudy or not windy, you can be importing. So
in principle, I like the idea.
Another crucial partner for the Green Grids initiative is India. It's setting the pace with its One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative, which is now building energy interconnections right across the subcontinent and beyond to Southeast Asia, the Gulf, Africa, aiming for regional grids across every continent.
Our government is very clear in its mind about our obligation to the coming generations, about our need to leave behind a greener planet for our great-grandchildren. That's what this revolution is about. And that's why yesterday when Nicholas met me, I said that, we are so happy to partner with you because you are engaged in a cause which is important for the whole planet. Unless we convince our parliaments, unless we convince all our brethren across the world, I don't think that we have a very bright future ahead of us. So the time is now. And that's why I believe, Nicholas, that your initiative is important and urgent.
It's this sense of importance and urgency that drives the next meeting of the Climate Parliament at the UK Foreign Office's Wilton Park.
We have the technology we need right now to fix this problem. And we have no shortage of renewable energy resources. We could power 10 world economies on solar power alone. We could power 10 world economies on wind power. But we can only harness that massive potential if we have enough long-distance transmission lines that connect all the major consumption centers, the cities and the factories, with the best locations for renewable energy.
The idea is catching fire, with potential interconnections being explored all around the world.
Our plan is that to connect the Kyushu with the Busan, and also Busan to connect to Matsue. And then China, Korea is like this one that we are planning.
Solar energy from North Africa to Europe, so perhaps that there may be...
Not only could North Africa share its clean energy with Europe, there are plans too for Africa-wide power lines.
I think the potential is amazing. I think if there's one place that is suited to green grids, is Africa. We're not bogged down with existing infrastructure, for instance, that might make us look at legacy and hold on to things that were there for us a long time ago. We could leapfrog right into the green grids concept and start from scratch and get it right and become, the cutting-edge continent for renewable energies, using the concept of green grids and sharing of our resources and trading in our resources. And that could be our oil, that could be our exportable resource to Europe and the rest of the world. Our planet has given us everything. Perhaps it's just how we share it, how we collaborate on some of these resources that is the answer to the want in one place and the abundance in others.
That means we have to, in developing countries, double, redouble, and double again the electricity supply, because development is work, and work requires energy, and it would be completely unjust if the world's poor were not able to have the energy supplies that have lifted the rich countries out of poverty in generations past. So green grids as a concept includes helping the world's poorest people to harness the solar, wind, small hydro and other renewable energy potential that they've got right on their doorstep in order to power their own development. And as we approach COP26 in Glasgow, the initiative's really coming together. The COP Presidency has taken up the initiative and is aiming to make this one of the significant outcomes to come out of the COP.
In May 2021, the governments of the UK and India made a critically important joint announcement. They formally committed themselves to launch a Green Grids initiative at COP26.
This is the big event that we've been waiting for some years, when the leaders of the world come together to commit to stronger action on climate change, to commit very specifically to building the new large-scale generating capacity for wind, solar and other renewables, to building the large continental-scale grids and interregional grid connections that we need, right down to solar panels on every roof and solar microgrids for African and Asian or Latin American villages.
We've got to do this incredibly fast. And in order to do that, we need to really step up the level of political will, political energy behind these efforts. And that is what we're aiming to do in Glasgow.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you are joining us from today. My name is Cordy O'Hara, and I will be the moderator for today's session, which is the closing plenary session of the Green Grids Initiative, One Sun, One World, One Grid, Northwest Europe Cooperative virtual event. In my day job as President of National Grid Ventures, I'm responsible for the development of subsea electricity interconnectors to enable the exchange of renewable energy between the UK and our European neighbours. In fact, I'm proud to say that earlier this month, we successfully launched the world's longest subsea electricity interconnector to link the UK and Norway grids for the very first time. That's why I'm so honoured and excited to have the opportunity to be part of this event, which in advance of COP26 has assembled a truly remarkable panel of leaders and technical experts from around the world. Over the last 2 days, over 200 participants have met to map out the shared challenges and the shared solutions that the Green Grid Initiative, One World, One Sun, One Grid will focus on following its launch at the World Leaders Summit in Glasgow just 3 weeks from today. Today's closing plenary session will emphasise how international collaboration is key to accelerating the transition to clean energy. We'll hear brief reports from session chairs on some of the key themes emerging from discussions on regional priorities, technical and regulatory cooperation, and of course, how we're to mobilise the volumes of investment required to rise to the challenge. In particular, we've explored the experience of Northwest Europe in developing its offshore wind resources combined with cross-border power trading. Over the last 20 years, Europe has been a world leader in its sharing of best practice and information on new technologies, the development of market frameworks, and grid planning. So to start, it is an absolute pleasure to kick off our ministerial session with ministers from the UK, India, and Belgium. First, it is my honour to introduce the Right Honourable Kwasi Kwarteng, UK Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, who has the responsibility for shaping the UK's energy transition, which of course will be critical in achieving its target of reaching net zero emissions by 2050.
Thank you very much, Cordy. It's a real pleasure for me to join you all today. And thank you also to the Government of India, the International Solar Alliance, the World Bank, the Climate Parliament, National Grid, Ofgem, Wilton Park, and all the other partners that are involved in organising this tremendous event. As many of you will know, the UK has made accelerating the global clean power transition a top priority for our COP26 presidency. Over the last 2 years, we have worked tirelessly with countries and partners across the world in this endeavour. That engagement has shown that to meet our climate targets and keep the 1.5 degrees within reach, we do face a huge challenge. How do we build and operate electricity grids that can absorb even larger shares of variable renewable energy, while also meeting our rapidly growing global power needs securely, affordably, and reliably? To meet this challenge, we know that we need new transmission lines crossing frontiers and time zones, integrated into expanded, modernised regional, national, and local grids. That needs to be coordinated with rapid scale-up of mini-grids and off-grid energy access solutions and supported by modern power systems. This is why the International Energy Agency's recent analysis calls for a tripling in investment in grid expansion and modernisation from $260 billion to $800 billion annually by 2030. The IEA is also clear that without increased global collaboration, the global clean economy transition could be delayed by decades. This is why, earlier this year, Prime Ministers Modi and Johnson agreed that the UK and India should co-found the Green Grids Initiative, One Sun, One World, One Grid, at COP26 to mobilise the global technical, financial and research cooperation that we need to address this challenge. By bringing together a coalition of leading actors in the green grids field, the GGI-OSOWOG will work to mobilise the support countries needed that we need to realise their clean power potential by helping develop new cross-border interconnections, stronger regional and national grids, and modern power systems, storage, and other off-grid solutions. In doing this, we will help to realise Prime Minister Modi's vision of one sun, one world, and one grid. Over the course of these 2 days, the event has discussed innovative work of the ISA, as well as India's experience in developing the One Sun, One World, One Grid vision. The event has also emphasised the importance of active and sustained international collaboration for maximising the deployment of renewable resources, as demonstrated through Northwest Europe's experiences of developing offshore grids. This is critical for the UK as a world leader in offshore wind in order to hit our ambitious target of 40 gigawatts by 2030. The UK is already making great strides, and in May 2021, we broke a new wind power record with 48.5% of our electricity coming from both onshore and offshore wind turbines. We will continue to work closely with our European neighbours and partners to ensure we can all benefit from the huge resources in the North Seas. The need for a joined-up approach in the North Sea and globally will only increase, as will the opportunities to build hybrid interconnectors. All of this represents a huge, unique opportunity for green growth that not only supports the economy, but crucially supports our planet. The UK has shown that growing our economy and cutting emissions can be achieved at the same time. Between 1990 and 2019, the UK reduced emissions by over 40%, while growing the economy by nearly 80%. But we want to do more. That is why here in the UK we've committed to decarbonise the electricity system by 2035. And of course, international collaboration is vital, not just between countries, but between institutions and all sectors of society. I've been very pleased to hear through this dialogue how public and private sector financial bodies are stepping up their efforts to support countries' green grids needs. While the progress we have seen in recent years is significant, there's still much work to be done. That's why at the COP26 Energy Day, we will showcase commitments to scale up clean power, to stop new coal power, and support a just transition. We will ask countries to back new breakthrough goals to make clean technologies like green grids the most affordable, accessible, and attractive option across all sectors before 2030. And through the GGI One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative, and in close partnership with our friends and colleagues in India, we will look to strengthen international collaboration well beyond COP26. Because it is no exaggeration to say that it is only through working together that we can realise the full potential and the full vision of a planet powered by good, clean, green energy. Thank you all very much. We look forward to working with many of you at COP26 and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary of State Kwarteng, for setting out the challenge the world faces in achieving the global clean energy transition and for sharing the UK's experiences of energy cooperation in Northwest Europe. I now have the privilege of introducing the Right Honourable R.K. Singh, India's Minister for Power and New and Renewable Energy, who has been a passionate advocate on the global stage for international cooperation in the clean energy transition.
Thank you. Excellency, Wasi Kwarteng, the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, United Kingdom. The Minister for Energy, Belgium, Brussels, Her Excellency Tin van der Straten. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here. This is a bit of a curtain raiser leading up to the formal launch of the One Sun, One World, One Grid, a Green Grids initiative in COP26. Our government, led by Prime Minister Modi, has been firmly committed to the cause of energy transition, to the cause of the environment. We believe that we have a duty to leave behind a healthier world for our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a healthier planet. And therefore, as early as 2015, our Prime Minister announced that by 2022 end, we shall have established 175 gigawatts, that's 175,000 megawatts of renewable energy capacity. And we are quite close to it. And in fact, from that time onwards, we have been relentlessly pursuing energy transition, and we have been raising our ambitions. And now we have raised our ambitions to achieving an installed capacity of 450 gigawatts. That means 450,000 megawatts by 2030, which is a real challenge. But we shall go there. In fact, our renewable energy program has been doing quite well. We had pledged in our NDCs that by 2030, we will have 40% of our established capacity coming from non-fossil fuels. We've already reached 39%. So the target which we had set for 2030, we shall achieve by 2022. That means we'll, by 2022, about 40%. That what we had promised in NDCs for 2030, we will achieve that. And by 2030, it will be at least 450 gigawatts. It will be, that is a sacrosanct, that is a target which is sacrosanct for us. Similarly, in the reduction of emissions, we had pledged that by 2030, we will bring down the emissions intensity of our economy by 33% as compared to 2005 levels. Now we are already at around 28%, so we shall cross that NDC as well. This is because of our conviction that we have a duty to leave behind a healthier planet for the coming generations. If you look at it, look at India. Its per capita emissions and per capita energy consumption is just about 1/3 of the world average, just 1/3 of the world average. And the total carbon space which we have occupied till now is not more than about 3.5–4% of all the carbon space which has been occupied. So our contribution to global warming on a per capita basis has been rather modest, and it will continue to be modest. But that does not, that is not something which we take into account. We still need to carry on with our energy transition, and we are carrying on with our energy transition. Now, we've added huge quantities of renewables. We already have about 147 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity established, and we have about 63 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity under construction, which adds up to about 210 gigawatts out of my total established capacity of about 380 gigawatts. So we are, if you take the capacity under construction, we are already more than 50% of our total capacity is from renewables. Now we face challenges along the way. One of the major challenges is that of the intermittence. You don't have the sun when it sets, the solar goes off. When the wind does not blow, the wind energy goes off. So that is something which is a challenge for energy transition, not only for us, but all those countries which are, embarked on this journey of energy transition. Storage is necessary, and storage is expensive. The last we checked, the last time we established some storage capacity, it costs us almost $200, in fact $225 per kilowatt hour. That was the cost. And similarly, pumped hydro is also quite expensive. So the energy transition is hit by this roadblock, the fact that storage is expensive. Now, one way out of that is that if we have one grid connecting the world, then that will reduce the requirement of storage. When the sun sets at one place, when the sun sets in India, it will still be shining in Saudi Arabia or in Morocco or in Europe. And similarly, when the sun sets in Vietnam, it will still be shining in India. So if we have one grid, our Prime Minister's vision is that if we have one grid connecting the world, then the sun will never set. And then the requirement of storage will come down. So that is something which we feel is the future. Now, it doesn't look as far-fetched as it sounded at that point of time. It doesn't look as far-fetched as that, as we sounded at that point of time, because we already have regional grids. We have the sort of regional grid connecting India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and parts of Myanmar. Similarly, Africa has a regional grid. Europe has a regional grid. What needs to be done is to connect these regional grids, and we will have one grid connecting the world. That in essence is the vision. So, and that is the initiative. So we intend to come together, all the countries of the world, and connect ourselves so that the sun never sets and the sun is always shining somewhere. And in the country where it's already dusk or in the evening, we can draw power from countries where the sun is still shining and the wind is still blowing. That will be a green grid entirely. And it will reduce the cost of the energy transition. That is the vision which we have embarked upon. And we thank all the countries who are coming together to join us on this initiative. This is an initiative which is absolutely essential for energy transition, and energy transition is something which is absolutely essential for the health of the world. So I wish this conference success. I'm quite sure that new ideas will come forth. We'll have to set up mechanisms for managing the international grid, managing the world grid. And we'll have to have a grid code for the world grid. Now, all these are things which need to be addressed. And we propose to address that as, after setting up structures, after we begin we launch this in COP26. But once we set these structures in place, then the progress will be rapid. And I'm quite sure that every country will want to join, because it benefits every country. It benefits the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Singh, for sharing India's experience and ambition on renewable energy, as well as India's inspiring vision for the one sun, one world, one grid. Next, I'd like to turn to Belgium. I know through my own business that for the last 15 years, Belgium, like the UK, has been a pioneer in offshore wind and interconnection. Now Belgium is pioneering again, this time with an energy island. It's an example of how countries can work together in a structured manner to overcome all sorts of barriers. One of the architects of the Energy Island vision is Minister Tine van der Straten, who first worked in the Parliament's Commission for Energy, followed by years of energy law practice. And now she is the Minister of Energy in Belgium. Minister van der Straten.
Thank you. Thank you, dear colleagues from the UK, Mr. Secretary of State Kwasi Kwarteng, and also a dear colleague from India, Mr. Singh. Dear ladies and gentlemen, 15 years ago, we decided to install a wind farm in the North Sea. Today, Belgium is number 5 worldwide and a global leader in this technology. And we can proudly say that our wind farms are a national pride, just like our beer, our chocolate, and our Belgian fries. This year, we decided to transform our North Sea once again into one big sustainable power plant. We policy leaders, we need to act now and invest today in the energy of tomorrow. Words are not enough. We need action from decisive political leaders and engagement from all countries, big and small. Public spending is a bedrock on which we build a prosperous society. Climate change is happening, and energy will be part of the solution. The COVID crisis seems to be eased and economic activity picks up. The soaring energy prices in Europe as elsewhere make it obvious. It's not back to business as usual. We have to push the fast forward button, and I would say fast forward without drama. Investing in renewable energy production protects us against these high prices. We need to step up investments in renewable electricity production and look for more sustainable alternatives to fossil fuel. For 2030, Belgium's target is to double its offshore wind capacity. But we need to look for even more capacity in our seas as well as abroad. So how can Belgium, as a small country, contribute? Belgium's strategic advantage is not the presence of raw materials. We don't have mountains of hydropower. We don't have oil or gas fields in our subsurface. But we have something else. We are a land of pioneers. We have expertise and we have passion. We are not afraid to innovate. And Belgium is at the cradle of every energy cooperation in Europe. We are masters in collaboration and cooperation, in finding suitable compromises. And we are willing to share this, because alone you go faster, but together you go further. As part of the Belgian recovery plan, we will create an energy island in the North Sea. And this island will serve as an energy hub, opening up a whole range of different possibilities, from connecting offshore wind to linking electricity interconnectors with other countries. In short, the North Sea has the potential to become one big renewable energy plant. Greening the grid is here in full swing. In this transition to 100% renewable energy, we need to take everybody along. And therefore, we want to involve citizens in the offshore wind projects, so they can take their energy future in their own hands. The energy transition is not based on green electrons only. Green molecules will be part of the deal too. Hydrogen will play a crucial role in decarbonizing difficult to abate sectors. Belgium is located in the heart of Europe, at an energy crossroads, and it can serve as import hub. Solar energy in India will be more cost-effective than in Belgium, and we are a partner if India envisages to chip their sunshine around the world. One grid, one world, one sun. And this offers new opportunities for cooperation, not only within the EU, but also with global players. Ladies and gentlemen, Belgium was part of the founding countries of almost every structured energy cooperation. And we have shown that when we join forces, we can achieve almost anything. And this is precisely what we need to do today. Join forces by forming strategic partnerships. Every step in the societal evolution until today is accompanied by changes in energy commodities, from kindling fire to peat and coal over oil and gas. Energy is a lifeline of our society, of our welfare, and the driver of our industries. We all know that the Stone Age didn't end because of the lack of stones. The Stone Age ended because there were new and better technologies available. So let's invest today in our energy infrastructure of tomorrow, and together with partner countries around the globe, because 2030 is now. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Minister van der Straeten, and thank you for your leadership in driving international collaboration on new ways to connect offshore wind. Next, we have two very distinguished speakers who will help us explore the scale of the challenge we faced. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Ajay Mathur, the Director General of the International Solar Alliance, which was established as a coalition of solar resource-rich countries to address their special energy needs. Dr. Mathur.
Thank you, Ms. O'Hara. I'd like to thank the UK Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, the Right Honourable Kwasi Kwarteng, the Indian Minister for Power and New and Renewable Energy, Mr. R.K. Singh, and the Belgian Energy Minister, Ms. Tine van der Straeten, for participating in this ministerial session on green grids, one sun, one world, one grid, and more importantly, for sharing their vision and their passion. Back in simpler times in 2018, just 3 years ago, when the idea of the one sun, one world, one grid was put forth by the Indian Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, at the first assembly of the International Solar Alliance, it did seem to many, many people a far-fetched vision. Since then, the world has gone through a stretch of trying times, not just in the form of a global pandemic, but also in the form of extreme weather events. Climate change, its mitigation and sustainable development have become a major part of the conversations, of the decisions around the globe. Through these years, the vision of the one sun, one world, one grid has evolved. After being appointed as the nodal energy for the initiative, the International Solar Alliance, ISA, brought on board expert consultants from a consortium of countries, including Electricité de France, EDF, AETS, a French consultancy company, and TERI, the Indian Policy Research Organization and think tank. These consultants have been deployed to study the feasibility of developing the one sun, one world, one grid into a full-fledged project with a long-term vision, implementation plan, roadmap, and an institutional framework, including a regulatory framework for implementing it. As a result, in the coming months, the One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative is expected to touch some major milestones. The initial studies that have been conducted will give us a glimpse of where we are going, the size and scale of what we are looking at, and the kinds of challenges that we need to address at a country level in order to move ahead. We at the International Solar Alliance are looking forward to the combined might of the initiative, the Global Green Grid Initiative, and the One Sun, One World, One Grid Initiative to propel them together to great lengths. We at the ISA are eagerly looking forward to this. We would like to continue the momentum the initiative has gathered in the past few months and start reshaping the cross-border interaction projects in the coming months. We hope that we will be in a position to announce some of the first interconnection projects under the GGI-OSOWOG initiative, that was a mouthful, in the coming months. We already have a large number of cross-border connections forming regional transmission networks, as Minister Singh just mentioned. For example, the Gulf Coordination Council network helps trade power between the 6 countries along the Persian Gulf. The Asian grid, used by the Southeast Asian countries, enables cross-border transmission of electricity in East Asia, with the GCC-IA interconnection in the west and the ASEAN grid to the east. This sets up the cross-border links for an Indian grid. It provides us an opportunity to extend it to Australia on the one hand, from the Gulf to Africa and on to Europe. In other words, becoming encompassing and girdling the entire world. They provide us with a way to start off the One Sun, One World, One Grid with a big bang, cementing the way for further interactions with countries beyond these few geographies. It is the interconnection of pools within these geographies that will take us to the full use of the sun, wherever it may be, to providing electricity to where it is not shining at that moment. We see this global grid network as a key for taking access to energy to places where we would like to see remarkable developments and the end of energy poverty. The initiative would bring energy security to regions and countries that have been struggling to supply reliable electricity to all their people and all their businesses. We would like this network to carry the message of energy transition across borders and help countries achieve their sustainable development goals while helping them cut down on their carbon emissions. Sustainable development and reduction of carbon emissions are at the heart of the grid. In all ways, this GGI-OSOWOG initiative is one of the most significant drivers of change in making a just transition to clean energy. It is now also a viable reality. As we move ahead, we hope to get more solutions ready to tackle some of the significant hurdles that we anticipate and we know that we will face. Lack of financing is just one of them. Yesterday's discussion here focused on this. You discussed that the annual current investment in grid infrastructure should be somewhere around $300 billion. And this is a long way from the $800 billion that is needed annually between 2026 and 2030. I also found that there was broad agreement yesterday on the need and urgency in emerging markets to increase financing in all countries, especially the poorest. It was mentioned that in a post-COVID world, global capital flows are truly global, since there is pressure in all parts of the world to make investments towards greening their respective economies and addressing climate change. Emerging markets obviously have a tougher battle in competing for the same money that could be financing green investments in the developed world. This is something that the financiers need to keep in mind and policymakers need to enable. The discussion yesterday also highlighted the need to tackle associated issues, such as the need for cohesive policy frameworks, for regulations which enable this transfer, for societal convictions in moving ahead in this direction, and to keep in mind the job creation that this would entail. All of these are issues that we will have to address as we go along and hopefully would move us ahead as well. Where we are today is at a point where we have our job cut out for us. We have a strong team of partners, backing from the two most enterprising nations of the world, and an institutional structure in place to deliver what could very well be the next biggest modern engineering marvel. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Mathur. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Junaid Ahmad, Country Director for the World Bank India. Dr. Ahmad.
Thank you very much. Honourable ministers from the UK, from India and from Belgium, the Director General of the International Solar Alliance, ladies and gentlemen, a good day to all of you from Washington, DC. It's still very early, the sun is not out, it's just about to come out. So I think that it's symbolically the right time to really speak about the one sun, one world, one grid, which was really the brainchild of the Honourable Prime Minister of India. Even while we talk about finance and the technical aspects of the notion of a green grid, I think we should just reflect for a second on what this political vision of the Honourable Prime Minister of India is all about. There are quite a few implications. The first implication is that a one grid story is really about catalyzing the commons to serve the collective. This is not about a technical issue. This is truly a very much a vision of political connections to serve the collective. Second, this is not about leveraging energy sources belong to one nation or the other, but it's leveraging the energy source that belongs to everyone. Both these ideas of serving the collective and leveraging common resources of energy really deal with what Francis Fukuyama talked about, that in today's world, development is about shared sovereignty. It's about crossing boundaries of sovereignty to solve global solutions. And as a Bangladeshi today, 50 years into the independence of my own country, we depend on the world to create that collective so that we can continue our growth as a nation. This is something that is resonating through many countries, and that's the power of this one grid. But there are two very important implications that I want to stress amongst the many that all of you have mentioned. The first is that the multilateral system, of which the World Bank Group is one, has to shift from being a lending bank into a leveraging bank. Already in our programs in partnership with the government of India, there are two good examples that I'd like to share. The first is that we have invested $500 million from the World Bank, $500 million from the World Bank in solar rooftop in India that has mobilized $5 billion and has catalyzed 5 gigawatts of solar rooftop. Similarly, $100 million has catalyzed $1.5 billion or 2.5 gigawatts of solar parks, a leveraging of 15 times the original amount. This leveraging story is the story of the future. This is how indeed we can scale up the demands for a world that is consistent with climate transition. And I believe that Glasgow can be a historic moment where we can shift the multilateral development banks into a partnership with the world in which we shift from being lending to leveraging institutions, in which we can catalyze private resources into scaling up what would be, in effect, the one grid. The second implication, which is extremely important and which my colleague Ajay Mathur mentions, is that to make the one grid a reality, you actually have to connect regional pools. There are regional pools in Africa, there are regional pools in Latin America, there are regional pools in Europe. These are pools where collectives of countries are already beginning to trade electricity. The one grid would connect these regional pools. It is time for South Asia to create its regional pool. There are no regional pools in South Asia, and India lies at a very big leadership point of creating such a regional pool on the eastern side of South Asia, connecting the resources of Bhutan, of Nepal, of Bangladesh, of India. And the collection of this into an eastern grid can indeed, what I would argue, really catalyze a green regional pool. This green regional pool would then become a very important intermediate step into this vision of a global grid. And I think the final message that has come out, and it's a message that many of you have already shared, is that in doing one world, one sun, one world, one grid, a global green grid, you require a completely new governance system around the world, a governance system which deals with global externalities. And I think that is the challenge of Glasgow. Can Glasgow deliver a grand bargain in which we will enter into a shared society, a collective, which is fundamentally behind this vision of the Honorable Prime Minister of India? Please rest assured that the World Bank Group is ready to play its part in this, what I believe, a historic moment that will emerge out of Glasgow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. We now have the opportunity to learn more about what has been discussed by the panels of technical experts over the past 2 days. And I would like to invite the chairs of those sessions to report back to us now. First, I'd like to call on Nick Dunlop, the Secretary General of the Climate Parliament, to offer his summary of the session on regional and international collaboration.
Well, thanks, Cordy, and thanks, Mr. Ahmed, for that very encouraging commitment from the World Bank. Minister R.K. Singh described the meeting we've had over the last 2 days as a curtain raiser for the launch of the Green Grids Initiative, One Sun, One World, One Grid in Glasgow, and he's right, and it's been a very good curtain raiser. In our session, the first session yesterday, we took a quick tour of the world from continent to continent to get a glimpse of the thinking and planning that's going on in all parts of the world to step up the deployment of green grids. We began with a summary of the Green Grids Initiative, One Sun, One World, One Grid itself, from the 3 partners who formed a joint secretariat to bring it to this point, which are the International Solar Alliance, the Climate Parliament, and the team drawn from different parts of the UK government who've been doing very important work to move it ahead. We had contributions from 4 major institutions and 4 companies, the major institutions being the European Commission, the African Union Commission, ASEAN, and IRENA. The companies being, first of all, EDF, which gave a good presentation of the work they've been doing on the study to develop a roadmap for One Sun, One World, One Grid. We also had Sterlite Power, which is looking at putting in the first cables from India to the Gulf. Sun Cable, which is proposing to export through a cable from Australia to Singapore, and Siemens, a technology leader. The message from our session really is that Prime Minister Modi's vision is practicable. We can actually do this. The technology is not a problem. Europe has shown the way. Cables are crisscrossing the North Sea through which wind power is traded, and this is only going to increase. In Africa, we've got the Southern Africa power pool and other power pools which are going to be linked up in a continental power grid and so on. The challenge is speed and scale, and in order to step up the speed and scale, we need greater political will. And for that, we need to bring in all kinds of partners alongside the governmental process in GGI-OSOWOG, to use the acronym, like parliamentarians represented by the Climate Parliament, citizen groups, universities, multilateral banks like the World Bank and the others, international organizations, business leaders, investors, regulators, grid operators. Those partners have to be a little bit removed from the government-to-government process, because most of them don't take instruction from governments. And the UK has done a brilliant job over the last, over this year in pulling together in partnerships all of those groups. Likewise, the International Solar Alliance is partnering with the World Bank and others already. So to conclude, our session showed the huge potential for keeping on building that broad global coalition alongside GGI-OSOWOG, and the basic message is that all together we can get this job done. That's it from me.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Nick. Next up, I'd like to invite Anita Marangoli-George, Executive Vice President of CDPQ India, to provide the summary of the session on financing our vision.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to brief the Honourable Ministers of India and UK and Belgium, and also the DG ISA and my friends Junaid and Nick Dunlop. The second session on financing this vision of the One Sun, One World, One Grid, Green Grids initiative was really one of unanimity on the objective that this is a challenge but very doable project. We had researchers, multilaterals, philanthropy, private capital developers and technology providers. The big discussion around the large quantums, the magnitudes of investment needed, where investment would have to treble in terms of providing grid extensions, grid upgradation, DSM, and storage. On the technology itself, there was a view that HVDC is still state-of-the-art, and the real challenge is implementation and financing. There were some very good suggestions that came up, just as several countries, just like India, have been successful in policy frameworks for renewable energy. Similarly, there needs to be policy frameworks for transmission. Several successful cross-border grids, as mentioned by the Honourable Ministers, were also discussed, and the idea of blended finance, as was mentioned by Junaid, was also highlighted. The importance of philanthropic capital joining hands with multilateral and private capital is key, and the importance of credit enhancements, not just being generic credit enhancement, but specific, addressing specific risks. the importance of regulations across different jurisdictions, and as Minister Singh mentioned, developing a common grid code is seen as a must-have. Strong political alignment between the cross-border nations and well-structured projects which would be able to attract finance. What was most encouraging in this discussion is there's already efforts underway of blended finance and collaboration between private, philanthropic, and public capital. The ILN, Rockefeller, IMF, World Bank collaboration being one, and the systems values framework of the World Economic Forum, looking holistically at the transition along with job creation was another. So all in all, I would say positive and encouraging. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Finally, I'd like to ask Ashaya Patton, Commercial Director, Interconnectors for my business, National Grid Ventures, for her summary of the session on technical and regulatory cooperation.
Thank you, Cordy. Good afternoon, morning, evening, everyone. First of all, thank you to Secretary of State Kwarteng, Ministers of Energy for Belgium and India for leading the way and on how we can deliver net zero targets. I am basically here to report on the panel session which ran earlier today on the technical and regulatory challenges to delivering the net zero. On the technical challenges, we discussed the sharing of renewable resources across countries, and with this comes new balancing challenges in each country which could be shared. With the amount of renewable generation we anticipate to deliver sort of net zero targets, the sharing and optimizing of the renewable sources, which are weather dependent, will be key to delivering a globally affordable solution. Sharing the associated grid requirements across countries to share that renewable generation will be the most cost-effective way of achieving those targets, and thereby sharing the emerging challenges in balancing the grid as well. There was quite a bit of talk of anticipatory investment, where we need to be more strategic in terms of recognizing the investment needed to accommodate the renewable in the future and actually get on with it. When countries have clear strategic targets, it becomes easier to deliver by anticipating that grid investment rather than waiting for the generation to materialize before the green investment, and the latter can sometimes take longer. With the collective aim to share grid investments, this strategic focus then becomes much more important. We also discussed some of the broad regulatory challenges. I think it will come as no surprise to anyone that there is a need for coordination across countries in terms of those regulatory frameworks. This is central to delivering net zero. The regulatory frameworks don't need to be identical for investment. National Grid, for example, has invested in interconnectors for decades at the back of different investment regulatory frameworks, but they need to be aligned in terms of how the assets are going to be utilized. That need for regulatory coordination is really essential to providing a stable framework that will allow those investments to flourish. A couple of personal reflections on this. The numbers from India in terms of their demand and supply was just eye-watering. However, the general feeling of the group is that net zero is not the stuff of dreams, but an achievable target. And we're not building from scratch here. There's much to be proud of already, not least the amount of renewable generation being deployed globally and the role that each country has contributed to lowering the capital cost of those technologies. The UK has been particularly active on offshore wind. The most prominent outcome of our session is that this is a fundamental change at scale, which is achievable, but to achieve this target in the short time frame available to us, we need to share and cooperate both technically and in defining a high-level regulatory framework which works for operating those grids. And what that means is that countries need to get on with it and work together, not separately. That's it from me, Cordy.
Thank you, Ashaya, and thank you to all of our session chairs. It's clear that we've had some fantastic discussions on some of the key building blocks needed to design, finance, and operate the infrastructure we need to accelerate the global clean energy transition. We're nearing the end of today's session, but to close, we've invited 4 more distinguished speakers to reflect on what we've heard here today and offer their insights on the next steps we need to take. We are joined by Senator Abshir Sokar Halake, Senator in the Kenyan Parliament and the Chairperson of the Centre for Multi-Party Democracy, Kenya. Giles Dixon, Chief Executive Officer of Wind Europe. Randy Christensen, Economics and Financial Analyst, Clean Electricity, International Energy Agency, and Charles Wood, Deputy Director of Policy at Energy UK. So over to you, Giles, first, if I may. You're the Chief Executive of the leading industry body for wind energy in Europe, with more than 400 members from across the whole wind energy value chain. If you reflect on the European experience, which has already seen significant development of interconnector infrastructure to connect North Sea countries, what do you feel has been the key enablers in terms of regulation?
Thank you, Cordy. I think there have been 5 things that have helped to drive investment in interconnectors in Europe. Number 1, the liberalisation and integration of Europe's electricity markets that the EU drove starting from about 20 years ago. This created an internal electricity market in the EU. The EU has basically forced national governments in Europe to break up and unbundle their state-run electricity monopolies and force them to trade more electricity with each other. Secondly, genuine concerns about security of supply on the part of individual countries in Europe and a growing desire to have that safety valve of being able to import electricity from each other when needed. Thirdly, the EU was very generous, is still generous in putting funding on the table. They have something called the Connecting Europe Facility that puts big money from the EU budget into cross-border interconnectors in what are called projects of common interest. If you qualify as a project of common interest, you not only get the EU money, but you can also apply a fast-track permitting procedure. Fourthly, the EU has harmonized market rules for the trading of electricity across Europe in network codes. That enables us to make very good use of the interconnector capacity that has been built. And finally, we've built the interconnector capacity, yes, but it hasn't always been used as fully as it could and should have been used. So the EU has now brought in a new rule, the so-called 70% rule, which requires the transmission system operators at either end of an international interconnector to ensure there's always 70% capacity availability at their end of the interconnector. And that has helped us get over the problem we were having of underutilized interconnectors.
Thanks, Charles. Fantastic learnings. And if I could, you mentioned funding. What have we learned in terms of incentivizing the right level of investment to finance these projects?
Well, the transmission system operators in Europe, classically, they pay for their interconnector investments by the congestion revenues or the congestion rents that they earn. So you build an interconnector, that does create an increased level of congestion, but the TSOs earn revenue from that. And it's those revenues that have been financing the interconnector investments. There's still much more we could do in Europe to improve the capital raising ability of the transmission system operators. Today, most TSOs in Europe, they earn revenue that is linked only to their capital investments, not to their capital investments plus their operating expenditure investments. And we would like to see the TSOs move more towards what we call a TOTEX, total expenditure revenue base, rather than an exclusively capital expenditure revenue base. This would make it more attractive for them to invest, not just in the hardware, but also in flexibility mechanisms that will improve flows of electricity between countries in Europe and will improve their revenue raising capability.
Giles, thanks so much. Excellent insights and great to share these learnings so broadly today. I'd like now to turn to Randy Christensen, if I may. Randy, in your role, you're working extensively on regional integration as part of the EIA's Clean Energy Transitions Programme to look at ways to accelerate decarbonisation in emerging economies. So in that regard, how can other regions and governments learn from the European experience? Are these learnings transferable? And how do we encourage and support continued dialogue to enable the sharing of what has been learned in Europe?
Thank you very much for that question. I think it's a very important one. And firstly and foremost, I want to say that I think the European example, and especially the Northern Western European example, is an impressive example of extensive integration and collaboration, and should be a model for other places in the world. But that being said, I think one of the biggest transferable learnings here is actually looking at the path of how Europe has developed, because the where Europe is now is not where Europe has always been, and it's been stepwise and gradual. And when actually integrating energy systems, you're integrating systems of national security, and it should not be taken lightly. There are security risks, but also massive benefits to having integrating your grids. So showing how this can be done in a stepwise manner, and you don't need the absolute full perfect solution to get started, and to start to build that trust to utilize the grids, I think is really important, and is an important lesson from Europe. And also showing that as these benefits materialize, the TSOs and the governments of the world, and especially Northern Europe, start to accelerate on their own. Yourselves are a really, really good example, seeing how much investment is going into the North Sea, and I think it's increasingly important to tap into that resource. I also think that the European example shows the importance of data transparency. For example, the ENSO-E platform shows a lot of data across Europe that helps both TSOs, but also private companies assess the feasibility of investments into the European markets. And I think having more data transparency in the emerging economies will also help attract investment. So what you can see from the European experience is that strong underpinning institutions are key to driving the development forward. But when we look at emerging economies, for example, Southeast Asia now, there are actually grids that are interconnected. And starting to utilize them is important, starting to also look at the way they're utilized, because a lot of the way that they're utilized currently is on long-term, very inflexible transfer contracts. And if the Green Grids Initiative, as mentioned by Minister Singh, Minister Kwatang, is to help the integration of renewables across the world, then you need to make sure that the underpinning institutions are flexible, so that the grids can be utilized optimally compared to how the renewables produce. This is a really, really good example in the North Sea. And myself being Danish, one of the key factors in having integrated so much renewables in Denmark is the fact that we do have interconnectors, and we are developing them towards other countries, towards the UK as well. So I think that is a really, really important learning, that you don't need to have the perfect solution from the beginning. Getting started, developing the institutions as we go along, alongside the development of the infrastructure, is key. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy. Really appreciate you sharing those insights, and clearly lots of opportunity ahead of us. Now I'd like to turn, if I may, to Senator Halake. From your perspective, how important is international collaboration to develop and share renewable energy, and what, in your view, are the key challenges?
Thank you very much, Ms. O'Hara. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you, the Honourable Ministers of Energy from the UK, India, Belgium, colleagues from the International Solar Agency, and all stakeholders that have come together, because it's the same spirit that we're going to be discussing. But I'd like to thank, most importantly, the Climate Parliament for seeing the need to ensure that parliamentarians are not left behind on this. Because, first of all, there's all these ambitions and all these commitments and visions and discussions and statistics and speeches, but until when we start collaborating also on the actions, collaborating also on the accountability, on the ambitions and the visions. Until when then we hold ourselves and others accountable, then we will not be able to get the job done. And from where I sit, from my perspective, Mr. O'Hara, as you asked, partnerships are very important, and in fact, congratulations are in order for the good leadership so far by the Indian government, the UK government, who are leading the COP26 this year, and all other countries that have made a lot of progress on this, and the entire concept around one sun, one world, one grid is amazing, and therefore, and already it sets up, groundwork for collaboration, because it shows the collectiveness, the oneness, and the collective values and collective actions that we need to do. But until when we get everybody on board, and when I say everybody, most importantly, the people's representatives, for instance, and what the Climate Parliament has done, and I would like to thank them very much for creating this network of parliamentarians that need to be aware of these visions and these ambitions and these commitments, and to hold our executives accountable on some of the decisions and quality of decisions, and to make to ensure that our executives and our institutions are fit for this visions and this commitment, is what I think are the challenges. Other challenge is the fact that perhaps important pockets could be left behind, that would also would be the drivers of the change we need, of the drivers of the legislative frameworks that within which these ambitions can be broken down to what we do on a daily basis to achieve these ambitions. So I think from where I sit, I'm happy that at least in these pre-events, the legislative arms are being involved, and at least somebody from Africa, and I'm from Kenya, as you've been told. I'm a legislator from Kenya. My own country is very key in the sense that we have a lot of renewable energy resources and sources, but also we've utilized them. Our energy portfolio is very much renewable based, and we consider ourselves global leaders in that sense. And so when we think of the African continent that perhaps doesn't have that much carbon footprint, that perhaps doesn't occupy a lot of space in that, those countries can provide a lot of leadership to leapfrog this whole idea, because we don't have the baggage of perhaps trying to decarbonize even, or perhaps even trying to sort of deconstruct, fossil fuel infrastructure or deal with stranded infrastructure. So again, I'm happy that the Climate Parliament has seen it fit to ensure that parliamentarians around the globe are aware, are kept abreast of this, are capacity enhanced to ensure that they can actually, have a say, be able to be part of the legislative and regulatory and policy frameworks, and are able to actually hold the executive accountable on these beautiful commitments and speeches that I've heard today. And so I would like to urge, and I would like to say that please give parliamentarians a chance to be part of this, so we may ensure that we give the right frameworks. We are part of holding ourselves and others and our executives accountable for the commitments, and that we can also oversight the quality of decisions and oversight the institutions, both in terms of the flexibility that my colleague has said, but also in terms of ensuring that the resources are put in the right places to ensure the outcomes we want for a world that can transition easily, and also that perhaps then to achieve the OSOWOG ambitions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And I heard action, focus, partnerships, engagement, and what a great message ahead of COP26. So with that, I'm now heading over to Charles Wood. So Charles, from a UK perspective now, what's the industry view of the current policy and regulatory landscape? And where does that put the UK as we move into COP26? What challenges remain with regards to planning and cost-effective investment in energy systems when looking at an increasingly interconnected world?
Thank you. And welcome the opportunity to be on this panel with the other esteemed speakers. I would start by saying that decarbonisation is a global challenge. Therefore, whether we are in Great Britain, in India, in Kenya, or elsewhere, the challenges that we face are almost identical. And so you will hear some common themes with myself and the Senator's comments. But just as many countries in the world, the UK has a legally binding net zero target and interim targets for the deployment of offshore wind, the transition to zero emission transport, and the decarbonisation of heat, which are all a fantastic start. But while we've made good progress in power decarbonisation, the scale and speed of decarbonisation that which we need to see has never been achieved before. There is a clear need for public and private investment, and we need to see UK government and other governments go beyond rhetoric. The Prime Minister's 10-point plan and energy white paper were very useful documents that set the direction of travel and targets for delivery, but without more detailed plans for delivery, the investment won't follow. Targets are a fantastic tool, particularly on the international stage, but they are not the only tool required. So the feeling from industry at this stage is that we've got to get on with it. So when I say it, I don't mean future gazing. I'm trying to figure out a perfect scenario where you can understand the best possible technologies and deploy only those. It's about moving ahead. It's about concrete action to remove carbon emissions. And that will include a lot of renewables, new grids, different voltages, more interconnection, demand-side management, carbon capture, hydrogen at scale, and a huge need for spending on research and development. And it will also require heightened coordination and well-targeted intervention from states. And finally, net zero must come at a reasonable cost to consumers, and customers must feel that's the case. And this means two things in relation to this. One is we need effective engagement, both at the national level and at global level, with consumers to ensure they understand the transition, and gaining support will help us to combat some of the potential negative reactions when you talk about issues like sovereignty, which was discussed in the earlier panel. So the second is effective coordination across borders, technology types, vectors. We need better data, we need better monitoring systems, and more effective sharing of information across borders, as seen with this project. The lowest cost, lowest carbon of energy should be matched up to demand using the technologies that we already have in terms of IT systems, software, and COP26 is a really key part in delivering that. And in terms of the challenges with regards to planning and cost-effective investments in energy systems in an interconnected world, in order to develop or in order to enable the massive development of various technologies at lowest cost to consumers, we need efficient market design and we need price signals to attract private investment. And that includes the need to invest in physical networks so that new capacity coming onto the grid can be properly accommodated and used where it is most needed. We very much welcome the UK government's plan for an offshore transmission network review, which will help us to reach that 40 gigawatt target for offshore investment by 2030. But we need to resolve some bigger questions as well. And when thinking about investment in networks to get to net zero, there's some big questions that need to be asked. And the core areas in that are firstly coordinated cross-sector planning. The energy sector needs to be better at talking to industry, at talking to consumers about their needs and making sure that we're planning effectively with local authorities. We also need strong coordination on system operation across network levels, whether that's at domestic low voltage or the transmission levels or at interconnected cross-border levels. And we need more coordination and shared infrastructure in order to reduce customer costs as well as reduce the impacts on environment and local communities. So the international dimension of infrastructure deployment when it comes to achieving net zero means that we need a lot more regional cooperation. And we were pleased to hear the comments from Giles, his recent remarks on the importance of the North Sea grid, which remains of crucial importance to the countries in the region. And those joint hybrid projects can have a significant impact on trade and electricity, on costs, on zoning, nature conservation, security of supply, and a whole range of other factors So this initiative is a really positive one, and we hope to see a lot of support for it at COP.
Charles, thank you so much. What a great comprehensive answer, and lots more debate I'm sure we could have today. But I'm afraid that is all the time we have. I do want to thank the panelists for their expertise and insights. And I want to thank the ministers, the panel chairs, as well as all of our session participants for helping to illustrate the incredible opportunity we have before us and explore the ways we can collaborate to achieve a truly global clean energy transition. As I said in the introduction, I want to remind everyone that the Green Grids Initiative, One Sun, One World, One Grid, is expected to be formally launched at the COP26 World Leaders Summit on the 2nd of November. There will also be further events at COP26 Energy Day on the 4th of November that will help us set out more of the detail on this initiative and its future direction ahead of COP27. That does bring our session to a close. I am truly inspired by what we've heard today and over the last 2 days. We all agree that renewables will be at the heart of a global clean energy transition. What is also clear is that no country can go it alone, and no one must be left behind. International collaboration and the sharing of knowledge will be at the heart of our success. And that's why I'm so optimistic, because over the last 2 days, I've seen an immense amount of expertise and a real commitment to collaboration. So for those of you who will be in Glasgow in 3 weeks, I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you again to everyone who has made this event such a success. Enjoy the rest of your day.